Hi, welcome to the Canadian City and Southern Model Railroad. Today's video is about making some harp switch stands using my 3D resin printer and also some switching. Upgrading my stub switches to enable harp switch stands that actually move back and forth, I've had to do two processes. Now here are the harp stands painted black the way they came off the printer, and here's one that's mostly assembled. And here is parts for the throws. Now I've redone the throws to where they have wire instead of just printing, because I found out that the printed throws over time get too weak and either get brittle and snap or warp, which throws off the center of the servo motor working the switch. So the way these parts come out when they're separated, here's the portions that move the points back and forth, the stubs back and forth, and at the other end there's this little thing here which receives the wire coming up from the servo and also connects with the wire coming down from the harp switch stand, which causes the harp switch stand to move. Now I've gone through several different trials on this and come up with several different things. One of the things is I've found out that the length of the throw rod can be adjusted to exactly fit the center of the throw of the wire coming up from the servo. So that instead of having a standardized length for all of these, I can figure them out as I do them one at a time on the layout. Now here's the procedure for making the flags. These are the pieces that they were printed on, and the flags themselves have been removed, but there's a little tab and a little ring, and I've printed a bunch of extra the same time I printed the flags that we'll use to make the flags function properly. Now the flags are so fine that they do tend to break apart sometimes. Here they are that have been successfully removed from the supports. And on one side there's a little slight groove, and that will accept the 015 wire that I will super glue onto them that will be part of the flags as they move back and forth. Now after they're glued on, that's the first step. The next step is to put these little pieces on here, and their function is to keep the flags from turning, rotating as they go back and forth, because I don't want them to spin. I'll simply want them to move back and forth. Then after that they have to be inserted in the harp portion of the harp switch stand, and some sort of a little ring has to be put on the bottom, or I'm going to try putting them in the middle on my next experiment to keep them from dropping down or pushing up as the throw rods on the actual switch go back and forth. So here we see some that are in position, and I made little holes to spike these to the ties, and I found that that was just too delicate and too tricky, so I just put a tiny little dab of glue and glued them on. And I found when I had to adjust them that they could easily be sliced off with a razor if I needed to replace them or move them. Now they're very delicate because they're 3D printed resin, but with the wire they actually can take a bit of a bump, and they're easy to make, cheap to make, and easy to replace. But getting them synced up to where they turn properly, rotate properly, is tricky. They have to be positioned in such a way that they don't interfere at all with the points of the switch moving all the way, and that they don't put any extra stresses on the servo motors underneath the layout. Also, I discovered an incongruity that I never knew about. If the throws are on the curved portion of the switch, the flags work backwards. So I've decided I'm going to paint them to let the train crews know that they are on the curved part of the switch and not on the straight part of the switch. And you'll notice that these flags have already rotated because I didn't get the little piece that keeps them lined up, and this one will have to be redone. The same thing here, but this one's just fine. They can't turn sideways, at least not very much. See, that's in the straight position, and that's in the throw position. And I always thought that all harp switch stands were upright when they're in their straight position and angled when they were in their throw position. But I've discovered that it actually depends on which side of the switch they're on. Here on the computer screen is the final drawings for my flags on my switch stands. These little pieces keep it from rotating, and these little rings keep it from sinking too far down into the throw rod on the switch so that they don't just fall down to the level of this harp. There's a groove on this side and grooves here to be glued to the steel rod that runs through here. Here's the harp itself. This was actually a very tricky and took quite a few iterations before I finally got it to where A, it would look good, and B, work. It's fairly accurately scaled and dimensioned, but the change I made was to get rid of the pivot here and put this little opening so that the rod can simply go back and forth without having to have a pivot. Now the advantage of that is that with using the steel wire for the flags, you'd have to have some sort of a gap in the wire to make room for a pivot, and that's going to break for sure. So, and I tried that in the first place and it just didn't work. They'd have to be cast in brass or something to do that. And brass castings of these harp switch stands are available. They're gorgeous, but 30 of them with extras for breakage would run into some serious money. Actually, about enough to cover the cost of my printer. 3D Builder, which was free with Windows 10 and is available free for Windows 11, is the one I use the most for my CAD. It's a very simple CAD, doesn't do a lot of things, but for most things model railroad related, it's just fine. If I get into something a little more complicated, I use FreeCAD. After all, my railroad's on a extreme budget. Well, it's weeks later now. It was a much longer project than I thought because I had to print more than 30 harps in order to get enough to complete all 10 switches in the Canadian City area. Plus, it took a lot of redoing and rechecking the tiny measurements to get everything to function and all of the targets or flags to move back and forth without interfering with the stub switches moving all the way. So it's finally done, and here it is, Christmas Day, and I'm finally ready to test it all out. So Merry Christmas, and I hope to have this up in a day or so. All the stands are in place, and the targets or flags have been painted. Yellow on the top to indicate caution because you're approaching the points and they may be against you. And yellow on the bottom to indicate that when the switch stand is straight up, you're in the straight position, not the thrown position. Now over on this one, we're red on the bottom and green on the top to indicate that the switch over here is in the straight position even though the stand is set to the side, and that's why it's red on the bottom. So they're all painted that way now throughout the yard to indicate which way they're thrown and whether or not the upright position is the straight position or the thrown position. So now I'm going to do some switching. Number 8 has already got her coal. And we'll get some sand. Okay, that's probably enough. Now it's going to do the switching to get the 2 trains that are ready to depart. Number 8 will be pulling a stock train, and number 4 will be pulling the passenger train, which will leave first. Although, in order to make things convenient, number 8 will do the switching for both trains. Best to keep it nice and slow in the yard to prevent derailments. Picking up the reefer with fresh milk for the passenger run. number 8 can pull ahead and get out of the way of number 4, so number 4 can come back and get the passenger train. And sometimes I forget to pan the camera because I'm too busy making sure I'm running the trains correctly. That'll do. Now number 4 with Mike and Jake can come back. Get some coal. And sand. And fill up with water. The passengers are already on board. And the passenger's on its way to the town of Wolf. There was a short back there. Turned out it was caused by one wheel on the passenger train off the track from bumping the layout earlier, and not because of the switches being badly aligned. So now we can go back, and number 8 can get ready to pick up its short stock train. Drop off caboose number 01. We'll stop and fill up with water. I've forgotten which button does the water sound, so maybe on the next video. Switchman not paying attention. Supposed to pick up the caboose, not go back to the passenger station with a bunch of stock cars. And finally, number 8, with Paul and Lou, can head out for the stock pens in the town of Wolf. Well, thanks for watching. Like and share and all that stuff. And I hope you had a Merry Christmas, because I probably won't get this up for a day or two. Thanks again. See you next time.